Hey everybody, welcome in. It is the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, and we're back for another season. At least I am back. I am B Don, and I'm joined by a different host. You're used to hearing me with Donkey Teeth, but instead we have the Razzball Godfather, Rudy Gamble, joining us here on the podcast, and he's going to be he's going to be the co-host all season. So you're going to get the best advice possible from Rudy. Uh, Rudy is of course at Rudy Gamble on Twitter. I am at RazBeaton. If you have questions and you want them on the podcast, you can always send them to us there. Rudy, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well, man. Excited for football season for two things. One, Texas football is looking better than it has in the last decade, and two, it means it's not like 120 degrees every day.
Yeah, I mean, living in Texas, I can only imagine the heat. I mean, in Atlanta, it's hot, and we have a ton of humidity, which makes it terrible. But
Yeah, it is
the
known
heat
for it. Yeah, I
there,
mean, yeah, the hot Atlanta.
it is, but the heat there in Texas is something different. So I will actually take what we have, I think, over the 110-degree heat that you sometimes get set with over there. But yeah, we're here to start the rankings podcast and get those wrapped up and get you ready for your drafts before the season starts. Before we jump into the positional, Rudy, I just wanted to kind of ask you, as a whole, how do your rankings go? Obviously, it works off of your projection system. So how does your projections work for football? Your baseball is, well known, but
Yeah.
how does it work for football?
The biggest difference between baseball and football is that for baseball, you know, I'm projecting the full season and trying to factor in injuries and various things for baseball. And then, but I'm not thinking about like an April 15th matchup. There's a little bit in there for schedules and park factors, but it's basically you do the preseason, you have the rest of the season, and then it's like by the week, and you do 7 days. So they're different in that because then and in the week you're worried about pitcher hitter matchups, which you don't do that specifically. For football, it's different. Football to me is 18 weeks, and I know the teams, and thus I know the matchups. And you could, yeah, I mean, clearly who I think is going to be the week 15 matchup. The players are going to change because people won't be healthy. The spread is going to be a little sharp, is going to be sharper by week 15 than now. And what that does to the game scripts. But basically, for me, preseason is just like the first run of every week, and then you just add it up. So that's kind of help. So for me, the preseason is helping me get ready for week one. And thus the week one is just like, okay, let's just tweak and see where everything else is and see if there's anything I might be missing on from a news angle. Um, and then the other thing is that, right about now is when I'm comparing a lot with consensus and then just making sure, my depth orders, my estimates on things like snap, how much a guy's going to run, um, just making the overrides to what the system comes up with. Because for football, you can't automate everything. So you'll just see things like, oh yeah, no, the algorithm I had or had a much saw a little bit of Darnold last year and thought he runs a lot, and it's like I don't think he's going to do that for a full season. So got to take him down much,
Right.
from there. So that kind of thing kind of is where you start in like May, but it really picks up now when I feel like the consensus ranks have some validity.
Yeah, so the ranks get tighter, so everything kind of gets a little more dialed in, and also the news and clarity helps things, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, yeah, you spend a ton of, yeah, exactly. I mean, things, so you don't, I, the toughest thing about really digging in like May and June. And not that I dig in, but there's that extra amount of digging in where you feel ownership on stuff. And that's really bad because it's good to come into August, and it really is throughout the season, and just don't hold assumptions too tightly.
Yeah, I mean, every year we see that we know so little about what's going to happen.
It's
So just people get locked into
it's confirm
ADP. We got locked into everything,
it's
and
confirmation bias. So you're only hearing what you want to hear, and so I'm trying to stay as impartial as possible, and like and I certainly have some opinions are stronger than others, and it ends up looking like I'm bold and stuff, but it's all waiting to be proven wrong. um, and yeah, using kind of consensus to make sure if I'm going to be really divergent, does this make sense? Am I going to die on these hills? Or
yeah,
I guess in this case it'd be more like, I don't know why that I picture everyone else is dying on a hill, and I am on the bottom, I guess, and just wondering, yeah, you're too close. I don't know why people dying on hills seems. I feel like in wartime more people die on the valley.
it's certainly the place I think you want to be on top. You want to have the
You'd
angle
think
down, yeah, for sure.
the hill's always been like the positive thing, but I got caught in that phrase, and I'm like, I don't want to die on the hill for that phrase because it
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, oh, I forgot, I shouldn't have climbed Mount Everest this high, or the altitude. I'm getting altitude sickness. I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know who's in charge of idioms.
but
Does
yeah, we got to figure out what's
I
going
need
on with that one.
Bartlett's cousin or something?
It sounds like something Gray created, honestly. Something
Yeah,
random
I'm
that
not
he made
dying in
up.
this valley.
But as we're talking about that and we're going through this, you also use some of that to see like where the numbers might be wrong. We were talking about it off the top because we're going to start with quarterbacks, and we were
Yeah,
talking about Mahomes, and you have him at number one, which really no problem. Nobody really has any
yeah,
problem with Mahomes at number one. He's the best quarterback in the league. He may end up being the best quarterback ever. So, having Mahomes there isn't a big deal, but you look at it and you're like, well, everybody else has somebody else at number one. Is there maybe something in the numbers that I need to tweak? And then maybe that affects him, but it may also affect other people that down the line too.
yeah. I think for him, I was telling you, I felt it was a little too. The system was a little too high on him for running. Um, I will say that Mahomes, it's one of the things when you watch the game, it's really clear. But we talk a lot about Josh Allen and his running ability and scrambling ability. I mean, Lamar Jackson's on another planet for that. So let's say Jalen Hurts, certainly Anthony Richardson for the potential. If you look at this, Mahomes like consistently runs like over 5 yards a carry, and for like 75, 80 carries, like he's legit providing value. Might be a little different than the others in that he's less likely maybe in the red zone, but he seems it's one of the great things on that offense where it was like, oh, just take away the deep ball, and then he killed you shallow. And
Yeah.
the other thing, and then it's like, we're going to put everyone, we're going to blitz. He's going to beat that. Then you say, okay, we're going to put everyone back. And then he scrambles for 12 yards. I mean, they won a playoff. They won the Super Bowl with, him being gimpy and taking such severe punishment on the sidelines. Cruel, back-breaking hits on the sidelines. He survived. But just saying, like, it's just that other. I mean, he's got such a well-rounded skill set, and I tend to be more high floor on quarterbacks, and that it's probably because I'm used to playing more super flex.
Mhm.
I think if you're playing in one QB leagues, I think taking super duper risk is totally warranted because your floor is so crazy high, depending on bench size. So you could always take a safe number 2 anyway. So, but yeah, I think so Mahomes is one. Just I have him. I think it's him and Lamar are 1 and 2. Totally different types. I think Mahomes, you've got. I feel a little safer with, but I think either of them, I think, are the QB are going to be my QB1.
Yeah, and I mean it's pretty easy to see why either of them come in at 1 or 2 for you. I'm definitely more in line with consensus on my rankings, and I actually go Hurts 1, Allen 2, Lamar 3. So really going heavy on rushing quarterbacks, and I do tend to make my rankings more for the upside for a shallower type of league.
Yeah,
That's really the average type of league is more shallow. If you're playing in a 16 team league or a 14 team super flex, I get it. Patrick Mahomes is so much safer than any of
yeah,
those guys that I have ranked above him that, that adjustment definitely feels warranted. And we've seen Mahomes finish first overall more than once. So it's not like you're even taking less upside when he has huge years. They are absolutely massive. So it's not that bad. And as you mentioned, I mean, he rushes. You can pretty much mark him down for somewhere between 300, 400 yards, and then somewhere between 2 and 4 touchdowns. He had 0 last year. So if anything, he was a little unlucky with the rushing last year. And he actually had the most attempts with 75. So maybe not 75 attempts as he's entering, the last year of his 20s. But again, he stays in that high 300s pretty much every year in rushing. And that's not nothing. And, especially in certain weeks where the matchup really favors him taking that yardage that they're going to give him. That can be very helpful.
yeah. So as I look after some reprocessing, now I have Lamar Jackson just ahead of Mahomes. So I figure they'll be 1-2. I think. I mean, I think Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are real interesting ones to discuss. And I have them like in my top 6. So,
Mhm.
it's, and for the QBs especially are in this tight band. There's no massive separator because the volume all's around the same, at least for passing. I think with Josh Allen, you know, I really, really hate the weapons there.
Mhm.
I mean, Kincaid is fine. I I just don't like betting that a guy is going to be, I feel like a tight end has to be elite, super great Kelsey like to have the impact of a wide receiver when it comes to things like yards per target, passing it, 10 plus yard passes versus being like a target hog in the intermediate game that just doesn't drive as much fantasy excitement and ceiling for me. But we'd already, but I mean, to basically is fine letting Gabe Davis go. He was just a deep threat, but that's got to be right now one of the worst wide receiver rooms. And so I just don't think we've seen, even with Mahomes when he had that bad of a room. I think he was like, okay, get him out of the top 2. I think Mahomes now with the additions of Worthy and you know Hollywood Brown. We'll see if how much he comes in. Well, between him and Rashi Rice, we have some suspense.
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah, a little bit going on there. Hollywood dealing with the injury, obviously, Rasheed Rice, the pending legal issues over him. For what it's worth, I don't think he's going to get suspended this year. That's been the popular line this preseason, but that just depends on how many times that judge is going to allow them to push back that court case, I think.
Right.
So,
So
we'll
so
see
there's a
what happens
little bit of
there.
fun there. So Allen, I just think, and um, I do, and there's always the wonder. It's like at what point, especially if you look at this Bills team and say, let's say they're like they get out of contention, or it's clear this is not a Super Bowl team.
Mhm.
So let's say that's clear in the second half of the schedule. Like, just hand the ball to James Cook or another running back that the rookie Davis, someone else, in the red zone. Like, you just don't have Josh Allen taking on the whole team anymore. Save it for, try to extend his career a little bit, because I think all those things are viable. So I have Allen at QB4, not a guy I would draft, based on value and stuff like that. Hurts, who I know you just took in a draft, I'm more open on. I mean, I think the question mark I have there, he's had insane touchdown volume to date. With Saquon there, does it change it? I mean, I know tush push, but you only 1 yard runs are not like, it's not like that's 90% of TDs. You get a lot of TDs, rushing TDs, like, 5 yard, 10 yard. Like, Saquon's feels like the first pseudo bell cow he's had. We've had guys like Penny and Swift for a 1 year rental. I just wonder if that could go from 15 to 5 touchdowns. And I'd say the other thing is that we definitely saw a big drop or a drop in his pass efficiency last year. I think there were a lot more interceptions. I think he's got a high floor just because of the amount he runs and everything like that. So I have a QB6, but he definitely would be a contender for QB1. If I think it's all driven by either somehow they rekindle the offense. Maybe Saquon unlocks something. I really doubt that. It's hard to say, but let's just say somehow that offense clicks again. Because it fell off from the year prior, and he has 30 touchdown passes. So he's got to get the between touchdown passes and rushing. That's going to be his big play. Definitely potential. Yeah. I like the upside call on that. And I probably would like that better than guys I have ahead of him, like right now, like Prescott, who my system really likes. I think just because, they passed so much last year, and they're really not set up well to run. It's weird. Like, I do think there's times when you look at a team's roster and you're just like, oh, you're committing to throw it a ton this year. I felt like that was the feel with a lot of Josh Allen teams, maybe even up through last year, where now it's like, oh, James Cook might be a real running back. And that is a dig on Devin Singletary. I don't think it's like, yeah, you're kind of like a supporting running back. Like,
hey, they kept trying to replace him, and he kept being the best back there. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that. He does everything well enough.
No, right. But
that's what he did.
Right. But if you see like a guy like Singletary, you see like the Dallas backfield. I mean, I'm going off memory, but it's Zeke, Dowdle, and like Royce Freeman right now.
Yeah,
like,
it's not a pretty running back room.
That is not a balance. That's telling you, like, and I mean, last year you had Pollard. Granted, he was. I don't think he was 100% in the first half, but if they were an overwhelming passing team last year, just lots of volume, and I'd say this year I don't see that stopping, and I don't think they're going to be as good. So the game scripts might even knock that up a bit more. So it's an interesting. I feel like there's a few other teams like that. There's not many where you're just like, oh, you're telling us that you're just going to pass the ball a hell of a lot, because I just don't see you running the ball. And I mean, the other team is where Singletary went, which I think is there. There's definitely some signals there that I'm like, this could be like, on my stats, and when I look at my thing, it's like the average team tends to be like 58% pass in neutral. So then that'll go up if they're an awful team. So the game scripts force them to pass more and go down if not. And so any team over 60% is kind of like, oh, there's a pass heavy team. The Bengals tend to be in like the 63, 64. It's like, yeah, I think it's one of the things when thinking about wide receivers and just rooms is like, I don't think the Giants are going to be a good passing offense, but they might have a lot of it.
Yeah. They might drop back 45 times a game just because that's what they have.
And they can only be sacked so many times.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the Hurts Allen is fair. Or I agree, obviously, because I have Hurts over Allen. I just, we saw what Allen looked like before Stephon Diggs, and I'm not saying he's going to regress to that Josh Allen, but he hasn't really made other guys work either, other than Stephon Diggs. So as much as he was maybe a head case and a problem in the locker room, like he did stuff. So I don't know they're basically counting on Keon Coleman, like being an established wide receiver right out of the gate. Curtis Samuel taking a huge step, his like 7th season. And then Khalil Shakir being, I mean, he's a 5th round pick. He's fine. He's a good rotation guy, along with like MVS and Mac Hollins and Hamler. They can do things, but like they're not really good receivers. So there's going to be some flushing out that needs to happen and how this looks. I think Allen, I was worried about the rushing coming down, but with this, I think with the lack of receiving options, he may just have to tuck it and run a little bit more than he wants to. And even the Bills want to. I do think if they do, end up out of the playoff picture, as you mentioned, there is a possibility that, they kind of just run it down a little bit more and don't let Josh Allen do that much. But it's the Bills. They feel like they're pushing for every year with Josh Allen because it's the Bills. I mean, the Jets, they're hanging on by Aaron Rodgers, very, very old joints and who knows what surgery. The Dolphins, I think, obviously run away with it potentially, and then the Pats are terrible. So still, I mean, they're going to hang in, I think, one way or another. But yeah, okay. I dropped Josh Allen, and if you wanted to argue Mahomes over Josh Allen, I wouldn't stop you. I may still do that. If we get word that Lamar's looking really good, which I think all reports have been, so I still may make that move. But really, 1 through 4, we have the same names, and it's the top tier. You can kind of adjust them based on your scoring preferences, league size, that kind of thing. We talked about Dak, who you right now have at 3, I have at 9. And there's just a lot of volume. Like, it is a lot of volume. I just hate Dak. I'm a known anti-Daxer, so like I just assume he's gonna regress a little bit here.
Right. He's in that group where I'd rather, if I'm going to take him, I would probably take him in the 9 to 12 range.
He's a good one if he drops because a lot of people like me and don't like him, but
no, and I don't want to so in some for the most part I'm not looking to because there's not a lot of profit in that. I mean, right now the differences between the 3 and the 12 QB are pretty a point or two a game in projections. So I kind of see it as like I'm going to play toward the Q9 12 range, unless it goes unless the room goes crazy. If it's more of a best ball or a playoff format like Scott Fishbowl, I'm thinking a little bit about stacks and playoff stuff, but otherwise, I mean, so I think that in the 2 leagues I've had so far, I've drafted Jordan Love, who I think's fine on ADP. I don't think, it's just, I kind of like his upside and I'm fine, I think, with pretty much guys there. But yeah, I wouldn't reach on Prescott. I'm not loving that QB3 right now. But I gotta just think about what's wrong. It's not the rushing because he doesn't run anymore.
No, he doesn't run. I mean, they're going to throw. I think maybe the CD not CD suspension, but he decides to hold out. That's definitely going to hurt him because, I mean, it's an okay receiver room with CD sitting at the top of it. Without CD sitting at the top of it's pretty ugly. It gets pretty bad real quick because Cooks is, he's done his thing, but he's getting up there in age.
Yeah.
Jalen Tolbert has not really ever done a whole lot, and there's not a lot else. Like you look at the names, you're like, just throw a dart, I guess, and hope somebody sticks. But it's not like they got a bunch of draft picks coming in and they're replacing the left tackle.
Right.
That's always a big thing. So I think that's enough for me to, like you said, 9 for Dak, where I have him. I'm actually perfectly happy with that. I think that it may honestly even be low. That may be me just being a hater on him. Yeah. But I do end up with Jordan Love, like in that territory. I got him and Scott Fishbowl. Like I probably could have told you that's who I was going to end up with, even though I don't like Green Bay. I got Tua, who I always seem to have because everybody hates Tua. But everybody loves the offense. I'm like, but he runs the offense. I don't care if he throws it 3 yards and Tyreek takes it the rest of the way. He gets credit for all of it. So just give me all of that. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do that.
Right. So do you think it's like Brandon Cooks might feel a little weird wearing the same uniform 2 years in a row?
It is like the first multi-year contract he's had since his rookie deal. It feels like
I just picture him
he doesn't get traded.
He just shows up during every day for practice and where just his uniform's in a briefcase or something. Like, you sure?
He went and rented a new apartment just to mix it up and feel like he changed teams.
Look, I signed a 1-year lease that's called for month to month afterwards. So just let me know.
I can be traded. I'm used to it. I'm good. I pick up playbooks. I do 2 things. I run deep and I run screens. We're good. It's fine.
Nice. Yeah. So what do we else? Oh yeah, we're who else were we talking about? Because you like running quarterbacks, so I have a feeling.
I do. So Anthony Richardson's the next guy on my list to talk about. I have him at 7, which fits that top grouping of quarterbacks. You have him down at 15 right now. Obviously, last year was going really well, and then he got injured, and that wasn't so great. Is that mainly what's driving the ranking, or is it missing games potentially? In the season, or do you just think he's not as good as he showed last year?
Well, let me see. So I do on my thing. I have so he's 50. I have him 15 on points. On points per game. No, it looks like it's not the injury thing. I mean, I did discount him a bit, but it doesn't look like that's. Oh, I guess that's because I took the discount per game. So yes, it's a little bit on the per game, but maybe that would knock me up to 13 or so. I'm not very bullish on his passing, and that now the thing is yards per attempt, which to me is the easiest way to look at a passer. I mean, most QBs are within a smallish range, so that doesn't drive fantasy value a lot. So the question is, well, what about his passing would give me pause? It's one, I just don't see him getting nearly the volume of others. I see Indy being a team very incented to go run heavy with Richardson, but also Jonathan Taylor. So I don't think, and that is also going to find itself on your pass TDs that, I don't think they're a great offense, but even, but when you have a situation where you're so good at running and you have questions at the quarterback thing, there's just touchdowns that quarterback gets. I in my head, I think of Aaron Rodgers in his either of his 2 primes, where it was just he'd have 40 touchdowns and you'd look and be 8 of them were 2-yard touchdowns. Those are the ones that Anthony Richardson doesn't get.
Right.
There's and I mean, and that's also, and then there's others because Green Bay was just a very good offense. So that's the concern. I don't have him. I mean, I have him right now at 120 carries for 570 yards. I get that there is like he does have a potential to go for like 800 yards. I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes for a guy to get there, you're going to really have to do a lot of designated runs. I felt like he was exciting to watch, but did not know how to take care of himself, which is one thing that I think Lamar Jackson's never gotten enough credit for. And even to an extent, Kyler Murray, who, I mean, so those guys have had their dings and injuries, but when they run, they find their way out of bounds. They don't drop their shoulder and try to run over guys. That's the Josh Allen way, and Josh Allen is a unique cat. Anthony Richardson, I would be worried if I was Indy, that because didn't he have a couple scares? It wasn't just he got injured last year, but I think there was like one or two cases before that was like, oh, he should not have done that, and that was kind of built into his like play. So that would scare the hell out of me. So I don't know, like I don't see him getting that ceiling I don't see him hitting on all the things I want, which would be pass TDs, rush TDs, and rushing yards. And because his pass TDs, I don't think will be good. I can't see him getting super duper on the other two to justify it, because either Taylor eats it all up, or if Richardson gets the opportunities, he's going to get slaughtered.
Yeah, and I will say, a lot of what I'm basing Richardson's rank off is the rushing. I agree his passing is not good. He didn't, he's obviously recovering from a shoulder issue, so he didn't have the offseason to really work on that either. You factor that in with the shoulder injury. Like, I don't expect the passing to really be there. I really expect the rushing to carry it. But, as you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor's there. So they may use him as much as they can to take some load off of Richardson as well. It's tricky. It's definitely an upside play for me, and that's again how I generally rank. I will say something I kind of want to mention off the top. Are your rankings based off of 6 point per throwing touchdown? Because I generally think about 4, because those are the leagues I play in, but that could be, just a fundamental difference in how we're ranking as well.
No, mine are 4.
Okay.
I mean, I'd have to I could triple check at some other point, and I will somehow correct it. I'll go into this podcast and correct that if wrong. But I think it's based on the historical 4 for passing TDs. It's just the differences are so small. But when I have like Richardson right now at 21 TDs, and just about everyone above him at 25 to 30, I mean, that's 16 points, and the differences are that small that if I consider him like a big boy passer, maybe he's like 10.
Yeah. No, to your point, I mean, the difference between the number 1 per game guy last year, which is Patrick Mahomes, at 21.28, or it may change depending on your scores. Yeah. Don't freak out if you're listening, and but he's at 21.2. The number 20 is at 16.25. So we're talking about a 5 point per game difference. And again, that a lot of that comes down to matchup. Obviously, the top quarterbacks are the top quarterbacks for a reason, but when you're talking about that small of a difference, and it's even smaller when we're talking about top 6 or 7. It's like 2 points. That next grouping is another 2 points, and then it's like 1 point between the rest of everybody. So when you're trying to determine, okay, who's fits in at 4, who fits in at 7, I'm going to make a big deal out of it because that's what we're doing on the podcast. But in reality, it's like a half a point or a point, at most per game, and that's just the reality of quarterback. Unless you have some different settings, like Scott Fishbowl this year has some very specific settings. It's a super flex. There was first downs. There's all sorts of things going into Scott Fishbowl where, the top quarterback's kind of worth even more, but that's very specific. And most
Yeah.
leagues, again, do not have those kind of rules. If you have very specific questions, you can always come find us and we'll answer you. Let's move on to the later quarterbacks because we still got to get through tight ends at some point. You have Russell Wilson at 24, Fields at 38. That feels like you're just expecting Russ to be the starter in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a hedge in there, but my gut tells me that Pittsburgh offensively is just naturally risk averse. They did. I think there were times when they got a little pass heavy with Roethlisberger when they had some great wide receivers. Mm-hmm. They don't. They're just fine, and Pickens is fine. You're not. No one's confusing him for peak Antonio Brown or anything like that. So I think I just see like Russell be, as long as he doesn't make too many mistakes, he'll be fine in there. And they'll just go with him. But it's just, it just screams like that they're going to, Tomlin will figure out a way to make that team 9-8.
Yeah, just as boring possible. Run the games out and just count on winning by 3-4 points.
Yeah, they should be 6-11 or something like that. But he'll squeeze it out of them, but it's not going to be pretty. It's just crazy just thinking because I think over time Roethlisberger. At the end he was ridiculously risk averse. He was just throwing 5-yard passes every.
Yeah,
but it's kind of crazy. Fields is the most maddening. What kind of faces is Tomlin going to make on the sidelines? He's going to break. His head's going to explode if he with Fields. You're a Bears fan. You saw it. Some jaw-droppingly good plays. But
yeah, you just had. That's what it was. It was just. It was a ride. You just took the ride with Fields. It was up and down when he was having the good runs and the good streaks going on. It was something to watch, but it is risky. He did tend to start games slow. That's really, as you mentioned, not the Steeler way. The Steeler way is veteran leadership. It's check the ball down, throw the ball away. Let the defense do their job. That feels very Pittsburgh. So yeah, I agree. I think it's Russ. I think they'll have some packages for Justin. Yeah. If Russ is just incompetent and it looks even worse than it did in Denver, then all options are on the table. But it sounds like he looks fine. It doesn't seem like he's falling apart and missing throws by 5 yards. George, I like Pickens a little bit more than it sounds like you do, but the rest of the receiver room is not anything to write home.
Yeah, it's just say that. Yeah, when you think the few years where Pittsburgh really was kind of more pass heavy than rush. They had elite passing. They had some elite weapons there to work with. And that one I have seen. I have not seen anyone overdraft Russ Wilson. There's no need to even draft him. If he isn't, a top 24, if he isn't picked until the end of a super flex league as a backup, a QB3 on your team, that's totally good. There's risk he might get, and he's not good. But I've seen Fields drafted. Every time Fields has gotten drafted in my leagues, I'm oh, that's early.
Yeah.
Just and I don't love it. I get it. I just don't think fantasy football, that type of kind of swing for the fence, makes a ton of sense. That if you're telling me something you drafting Rashee Rice, taking a gamble that he doesn't get suspended. So that's knowing that he's going to be a starter if he's active. That's good. I get that. That makes a lot more sense to me than thinking than taking Justin Fields. And like with like with anything like a top 10 picker, whenever it was taken, I just remember. I don't know if it's been your leagues, but I just remember being like, "Oh, okay."
No, that was probably me doing that in
No,
previous years.
we haven't drafted.
No, I mean, I think Fields is an interesting upside play for, if you're playing 20 best ball tournaments or 20 entries into a best ball tournaments, I don't hate taking Fields as your third or fourth quarterback if you're going to do that kind of lineup.
Okay.
But yeah, other than that, Fields is strictly a flyer, and it's a flyer you're going to have to wait on. So he's going to get cut. So, because you're going to want to pick up somebody, it's like second week of the season, there's going to be somebody you want on your roster. If there's not already somebody in your free agent pool that you'd rather have as you look at it, but you're going to feel locked into Fields because you drafted him too early. So just let somebody else draft him too early, let them drop him, and then you can pick him up because that's when he'll be useful, maybe, if is the second half of the season.
Yeah. The only advice on Fields on draft day is compliment the guy or female woman who takes him, because that'll make it more likely he won't cut him.
They won't cut him early enough.
Oh my God, Fields! Oh, you got me on that.
Oh, you got him before I could. Damn, what am I gonna do? I guess let's just talk one last topic on quarterbacks. Late round, you've missed out, or it's best ball or it's super flex, and you're looking for, a late round guy. Who's your late round guy that you're looking at?
Oh man, that's a good call. It's
pretty ugly this year at the back end of quarterbacks.
I have it.
Okay.
Baker Mayfield, and I hate him.
I mean, too.
He's from. He went to high school in Austin, and then shits on Texas, goes to Oklahoma, or goes to Texas Tech, then goes to Oklahoma. But I keep an open mind, and Tampa. I like that Tampa offense. That's another one where systemically, I think that's a pass heavy team. I do not see a Rachaad White and what Bucky Irving and Chase Edmonds, I think, still on that team. Mm-hmm. That's not a team that's going to be that's a team that's skewing pass when you've got, when Baker likes to sling it and you've got Godwin and Evans still. So I think there's going to be volume. They're not going to be a great team. So not worried about game script either. So I don't know where did Baker finish last year? I'm going to check that right now. It felt like he was.
I think he
was 19
last year. Yeah, so he's top 20 for sure.
Oh yeah, no, on a per game he was 19, but because he stayed healthy. I mean, I have him. I have him not missing a snap. That's pretty incredible. But he ended up being 10. So a little bit volume stuff in. But yeah, and and that's his first year in that system. So 28 TDs, 10 interceptions. It's not bad.
No, it's not. It's definitely not bad. I feel like we've seen this. Just feels like the Baker, cycle that we've seen on social media, where like he does something good and everybody's like, okay, he can do it. He's turned the corner. It's a good offense. He's got, great receiving core around him.
Yeah.
Rachaad White, who, again, it sounds like I like a lot more than you do, but
it's
regardless, just it's
saying,
a good offense for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I see Rachaad White as like a decent fantasy play, but partially because at receiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just like with Singletary, you're just like, there's guys who are like, that guy's getting 250 carries if he's healthy. And I'd have to check if Rachaad White got there last year. But to me, it's it's just an extra little signal. Like, and then there's just some guy, Bucky Irving. I know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I
they
think
didn't even try and pretend like they were going to backfill Rashad
right.
White.
No,
If Rashad White goes down, they're just going to chuck it. Like,
r-
it's going to be old Tampa Bay days.
right. Where I feel like, yeah, let's say, as opposed to like a Detroit, where it's like, they went with like kind of the 1A, 1B running back thing, and then they draft another guy. That's a team that feels like it signals like we're never going to get too out of whack. This
Yeah, we're
team
going to
will
sit
run.
50-50 or even heavy
Yeah,
on the run.
right. So so for QBs that that all plays in to right now trying to tease out any little edges you would particularly in drafts where you can't make in season moves.
Yeah. I mean, to some part, it's kind of the Sam Howell argument from last year where, he's not good, but like he's going to throw. He threw so much
Oh
that it just
God,
made it.
I had him.
And
I had him. I might have had him in Razzball. I mean he was a pretty good guy to have on best ball.
yeah, for best ball, he was great because he would just chuck it. And some weeks he'd find the end zone,
Oh,
and especially in leagues that doesn't penalize interceptions too bad.
right.
It was really nice. I mean, he was
I think that
really fine. I mean,
I mean he was a great QB3 draft pick.
oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so I think I
Rashad
had
White
him.
did have 272 carries and
Wow.
64 receptions, which is the reason I love Rashad White.
Okay.
Just he's going to get so much work. He had 1,500 plus yards from scrimmage last year. He had 9 touchdowns, which I think could even go up. That feels low for that many
Yeah.
touches, to be
No,
completely honest. So
okay. So that is okay. So I stand corrected on Rashad White. But even with those 270 carries, they still had plenty of passing. I mean, and I do like the OC there. Or
yeah,
is it the coach, whatever, the offensive mastermind of Tampa Bay right now?
yeah.
Canales?
It's Jason Light and Liam Cohen's the offensive
Oh,
coordinator.
okay.
No, Todd Bowles. Sorry, Todd Bowles is the head coach, but he's
Yeah. So the other guy.
yeah. Yeah. All right, great. All right, Rudy. Let's move over to tight ends. Every year we talk about the depth of tight end, and every year we're disappointed because it's not as deep, and there's like 3 guys that you want to start. Last year, 6 guys had over 150 points of PPR. Previous years, it was 4. So there's serviceable tight ends out there. There's usually less than 20 of them, though. It's a mixed bag this year. We got veterans. We've got some up and comers. How do you specifically look at tight end? And also, how does it differ in a tight end premium? Because that's becoming more and more a thing as leagues kind of grow.
Yeah, I in the TE premium leagues, I tend to draft 2 or 3 guys that are my top 20-ish type,
Mhm.
and then just try to play matchups with it. I don't like I have invested previously in tight ends. It hasn't worked out super well. Um, I'm hesitant. Like it's one of those where like the older guys, you're afraid they're like, let's say a Kittle, not an older, just relative to some of the
Mhm.
others. And you're like, man, he's taking a beating. So
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable there. And then the younger guys, like, I'm not sure I feel comfortable that they're gonna be able to stay at this target volume. We've seen guys kind of flash for a year, but it's kind of hard. So you end up being I find it tough. So I tend to try to hedge bets, kind of QB tight end. I just try to wait on there. Again, if it's a league with like playoffs and stuff like that, I really like hedging. I really like, I'm sorry, stacking my tight end with my QB. Because I feel like, because tight ends score a bit more on TDs per reception. And so almost like I'll almost always, I love drafting that combination. But otherwise, yeah, I'm just looking to hopefully draft my like tight end 7 as the TE12 in the room and play it there, unless somehow the board goes haywire on me. How about yourself?
So in years past, especially recent years, I've been very willing to take Travis Kelce early. He set himself apart, but as we've seen, I think the last 2 years, he's starting to slow down. Even I don't think he's done. Just the connection that him and Mahomes have, and just the ability for those two to make plays. I don't think that there's really any concern on Kelce other than maybe health, just as he gets older at this point. Um, but also the addition of new weapons in Kansas City makes you feel a little bit better that they can't just bracket him every single play like they have been. So that all helps Kittle. I think to your point in tight end premium, it really has to be worth it. I think so often you hear tight end premium and you're like, oh, I need to bump them up. And this is the case of this draft I finished last weekend in North Virginia, the Nova Elite draft. It's tight end premium, but it's 0.25 additional on a half point PPR league per reception. And that's really that's not that much. That's not adding enough to tight ends to make them worth an elite receiver. That makes them fall into kind of the WR2s for their teams that can still be good, like the T. Higgins, the Jalen Waddles, the Devontae Smiths. Like, I love those guys, but that's where tight end falls then in a tight end premium if it's not really boosted. Whereas, like last year, it's got Fishbowl and that one specifically of our drafts. Tight ends are boosted so heavily because it's a tight end premium for your first downs. It's tight end premium for your receptions, and it's like a full point on each of those. And so it adds up over that time.
Yeah. I like to have, like I said, I just like to have like a good like 5 receivers, 3-4 running back. Say 3 running backs, 5 receivers. And in order to get something like that, there is a point where I feel like both the running back and wide receiver quality the running back becomes very speculative on playing time. And wide receiver just seems to get speculative across the board. Sometimes you look, I mean, I know one guy I remember from last year, I did take a flyer on like Nico Collins last year in like the 14th or 15th round. And that was just purely kind of a vacuum pick. Someone's got to catch the ball there. But by and large, I don't want to bank on that stuff at all. Where, yeah, with tight ends, it's like, I mean, you've got to think of it week to week. And yeah, a good matchup. Yeah, it's tough for tight ends to consistently rack up like, I don't know, 7+ receptions, 70+ yards kind of thing. So yeah, where it's not as hard, I think, on a wide receiver who's in a very good position. So that said, what tight ends are we most divergent on?
Yeah, so I mean, in the top tier, like I said, you start with Kelce, then you go Andrews. That's fine. I don't really have any issue with it. I go a little bit in a different direction, just as I go LaPorta 1, Kelce 2, then Andrews 3, but that's kind of whatever. I guess let's talk about LaPorta first off the bat here. He's the young tight end, and he was one of the best rookie tight ends we've ever seen. But as you mentioned, we've seen that before, and actually the track record for rookie tight ends who are really good is kind of terrible. They tend to kind of set that number really early and then regress a little bit. But
Right.
What are you thinking in regards to LaPorta?
I mean, I don't have much negative to say. I mean, I think the one number that stands out to me for last year is, you know, an ADOT of 7 yards, a yards per target of 7.4. That's just okay. like that, you know, it's just not screaming like this is a guy I got to get the ball. They got to get the ball to. Um, you know, you know, I feel like it's tough. They did it last year, so I get it that. But for a team with a fine quarterback, um, to be able to feed to run as much as they are. So, however that breaks out between the two running backs, to run as much as they are, have a clear, absolutely clear WR1. Um, you know, granted that there's a lot of room for LaPorta, I guess. I I, I like it. I don't. I don't see the tremendous upside there. You got 10 TDs last year. I really don't see a scenario where that goes up. So I'd say great floor if he stays healthy. Um, I think definitely in a league where people were sleeping somehow. I don't think anyone's going to be sleeping on him. But I feel like that could easily be his best year. Uh,
Yeah, I mean the 10 touchdowns definitely feels. I mean that's gonna be really hard to repeat, and I mean from a yardage perspective, he really only had. I mean, he had one game where he
one,
actually went off 140,
right?
nine receptions and a touchdown. Like that's crazy. That's a win you the league week. But like his next best yardage in reception game was 8 for 84, and he had a 7 for 84 without a touchdown
Right.
in the second one. So like yes,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if he's 40, 50 yards, which is what he was most of the other games in the season without 10 touchdowns, I mean that's not as impressive. A lot of yardage for everybody comes in, at less games than we think, but that's pretty heavy on like 3 games. Um,
Yeah.
I completely understand. It's just he looked so good at times last year.
Yeah. No, no. So I think, I mean, he's definitely in the running. I mean, right now, I have to. I definitely. I'd see him as my 4, but I could definitely argue with him as my 2. I mean, all the tight ends up there. Kittle gives me some pause. Um, Mark Andrews gives me a little pause.
Yeah, I mean, there's no safety at tight end this year like we have. You use at least in the past few years, it's been Kelce alone at the top, or Kelce and Andrews in certain years, and that was kind of the tier. Now it feels like there's a bunch of guys at the top tier because we're not really sure who's going to be healthy, who's going to be involved as much, who's for
Yeah,
real,
it's
who's aging. Like there's a lot of questions at the top end of tight ends.
right, and I think I would attack it with the thought that aside from a high tight end premium thing, who's going to be like the TE8, TE9 that kind of falls, and maybe they should be but whoever in that first group, I'm
Yeah.
kind of fine with. I'm not going to set the market on tight ends. Um, and if it is an older, more like established one, fine. You know, if it is like yeah, it won't be LaPorta, but let's say a Kincaid. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. I just don't want to invest, or let's say Pitts in a league where people, everyone has had him before. Um,
Everybody's owned him and been burned. Yeah, I mean,
so yeah, I'm totally open, but yeah, it's probably where that the first 6, 7 tight ends go. I probably am like, oh no, that's my RB2 or my WR3 or 4. Um, yeah, and it's so hard to be that tight end that like I guess makes me feel secure on everything, right? Like like if the guy's an awful blocker, my concern is how he's going to be used. Is he really necessary? That was, let's say, like the Mike Gesicki
yeah.
conundrum. It was just like I don't believe in that for winning football. that's good. Like having a tight end that can block. So like, yeah, I really like Kittle for winning football. The question's just like the biggest question: if Ayuk is gone and they just get back an okay one, then that could be that. Kittle's probably the big winner there. You can't give the ball anymore to Debo. He gets the ball about as much as I think you can give that guy the ball. So I feel like Kittle I could see being the TE2 if Ayuk doesn't come back. Not that he has a choice on that, I guess. If they choose to cater to his demands. Yeah. So I mean, which tight ends have you been ending up with?
So I guess in my leagues, I've been kind of all over the place. I tend to go about it similar to what it sounds like you do, which is you kind of take, tight end 5 through 8, 10, and just whoever tends to drop to you. I have pits in leagues. I think in the league that I just drafted, I waited for a while because the tight end premium really pushed tight ends up. And again, I didn't think it was a worthwhile premium to go after them. I end up with Komet, Hockenson, who I put in IR, and then I grabbed Luke Musgrave just as another option week to week if I want something until Hawkinson's back. And that was again waiting really late in the draft, and I feel like I came out just fine. I didn't get one of my top 10 guys, which is generally what I would like to do, but getting Hawkinson as somebody who's going to come back ready for the playoffs, in a regular league, not a best ball or a Razzball type of league where the playoffs are it's structured a little different. But in this one, I can wait till Hawkinson comes back. I can win based on the fact that I have really good running backs and receivers. And then when Hawkinson comes back, I also have a good tight end. So, like in a standard league, that's probably more my path. But again, I'm also not really afraid to mix it up and throw a LaPorta, Kelce, Andrews if they fall to be on the right price. I will say it tends to be when I have like an early pick this year, the ADP seems to give me the right area to take a tight end, a top tight end. Whereas if I have a later round pick, or later in the draft pick, like 8 through 12, it doesn't really like all the tight ends go. Tight end is one of those positions that will go through runs, and you watch, the top 3 come off. You're like, I don't really want to overreach for Evan Engram or Sam LaPorta in your case, or whoever it might be.
Yeah.
And so now you're slipping down to the next tier, and maybe they like 5 through 8 go, and now you're like, oh, now I don't want to reach for, Dalton Schultz or Cole Kmet because I really don't want to reach for them. So now I'm just waiting. And that's kind of what happens. It just depends how ADP shakes out.
Yeah.
I'm not scared to take a tight end at any point because the points kind of come from wherever, but I'm also not taking one in the first or even the second round this year. There's not the value at tight end like there has been in recent years with Kelce.
Yeah, no, I'm looking in it. So in a Razzball, I went with I ended up taking Dalton Schultz as my TE1 in like the 11th round, and then paired him with like Tyler Conklin. So
yeah.
and I in that case I didn't have Stroud, I didn't, but I did have Rodgers as a QB2. So there's one stack in there, and yeah, like Schultz is just okay. He's in the group of okays. I think Conklin's a little underrated, but I probably would have been probably happy with a Freiermuth.
Mm-hmm.
There, if Bowers was going to come dumb cheap, maybe I take a roll with that. I think, and then I'm just, but I do like stashing tight ends on benches where I can get them. And hope you kind of hit on something. I think the other guy I took in that one was Kraft on Green Bay, who and that's a bit of a thing. If he was about as good as Musgrave last year, and I think if one guy goes down, either of those tight ends is going to be a nice it's just a good offense.
Yeah,
And
I actually think Tucker Kraft is better when he's healthy. He's just a little banged up right now, so there's some worries that he may not be ready for the start of the season just yet.
yeah,
But yeah,
and like
I like Kraft.
right, because I mean that's one where it's just like they've got a lot of good wide receivers, but you know, yeah. So I like the Green Bay tight end. That proved to be a pretty solid spot last year. Uh, it's just that they kind of are 1-1As,
Yeah,
which kind of screws stuff up for things. Evan Engram was one I took in. I did take him in Fishbowl. I did have Trevor Lawrence. That is not going to say like my dream stack,
yeah.
especially as a Giant fan who remembers how like
Is that what it is? Is that why you have him all the way down at 9? You just can't get past the Evan Ingram
Well,
fall.
he's another one that I kind of, I mean, it might be all tight ends and some maybe like, I think Engram, it just felt pretty empty on his, like he got targets, but they weren't particularly like valuable. Like, I mean, he had trying to what his 8 on yards per target were real bad. So I tend to like, if my dream tight end would probably be one that can make bigger plays. So let's say prime Kittle. And those tend to be even more unicorny. So let's say, I mean, last year his yards per target were 6.7, and his ADOT was 5. His ADOT's been, the year before was like 6. If like Engram, he's just it's pretty crazy. Like, why did they throw to him 143 times last year? They had like Ridley and Kirk. I mean, I see that, and I think like either like the OC's on crack or like Trevor Lawrence. It has Engram on his team because it doesn't right? I'm at like 143 times they threw to him, and he got 6.7 yards per target. That's not good at all. It's just so blah. And he still only got 4 TDs. That for whatever reason, Engram has never gotten TDs, and so yeah, that those are part of the reason maybe. But I still ended up taking him just because it's like the
Might as well
floor.
stack them.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's the same quarterback as keeps throwing it to him, and now I mean, like their wide receiver room's worse. I mean, you traded Ridley for a lottery ticket on Thomas, and then Gabe, like maybe you throw it to me 3 times a game. Davis, like he's just running the Lucas route.
Yeah.
And if he's wide open, you throw it to him. He's got that one playoff game, and
that's all he's done. I mean, it's really all he has. No, I that's why I kind of like Ingram. Is just like they throw to him so much, and who else is there? I don't have him at like tight end 2 or anything.
Right.
But I guess I'm just acknowledging kind of the fact that he's probably one of the easiest tight ends to just pencil in, 90 targets to and feel pretty safe about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like in all that range is the guy. I'm a Jake Ferguson fan. I think that I mean he had he had similar ADOT to Engram, but he was at 7.5 yards per target last year, got 102 targets, and it feels it's a high pass volume team, and there's not a lot of great target. I mean, you've got Lamb's going to get everything if assuming Lamb comes back, they sign him. I think there's still growth for Ferguson. I'd say it's a really quiet 761 yards. And 5 touchdowns, and that's where I think there's definitely some growth for him. I wouldn't. I mean, I could see Ferguson having a sneaky. I would say last year he was a LaPorta light.
Yeah, no, I mean he was really good. I mean, if you just take kind of the fluky touchdowns away from LaPorta, he's basically the same guy as Ferguson. There's not really a whole lot missing there other than some receptions, and that I feel like that was more to do with LaPorta's early season or Ferguson's early season usage wasn't
You're
quite as
right.
high.
I'm looking at it here, and yeah, it wasn't really till game 4. But I wouldn't be shocked if basically Ferguson outgained him from week 4 on. So yeah, it's just the things you look at, and it tends to be the more you draft, the more you try to talk yourself out of or into these guys. And yeah, so on these, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe Ferguson has on getting 3 touchdowns in a playoff game is not bad either. So yeah, so I'd run with I'll have to see. I wonder if Ferguson was on the board and I took Engram. Yeah,
Oh, and
who
yeah,
knows?
and it's got yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so
I mean, it's an interesting thought. I mean, there's not like you said, there's not as much separation at tight end. That was always the argument for Kelce was just his separation from the next tight end was so big. And this year it's just not. Again, LaPorta last year was 11 and a half. We could take it down to like Dalton Schultz was down at 8. So we're talking about
yeah,
3 points. And nobody even wants Dalton Schultz. He literally sat around in this tight end premium league for forever. And who else is going to catch the ball over the middle for Houston other than him? They got plenty of receivers on the outside. So just
yeah,
feels like a pretty easy, 50, 60 receptions, 600 yards with some upside still there because CJ Stroud could take another step still.
yeah. I
All right,
mean,
let's move on to some of the background tight ends, Rudy, as we're starting to get a little long here. Hunter Henry comes in at 16 for you, 24 for me. I've been a Hunter Henry guy for so long. I had to drop him this year. He's been a little disappointing for me. Are you expecting a bounce back for the New England tight end with new quarterback, new everything in New England?
yeah. I mean, I think he's just that's kind of a situation volume play. I think he will get. I think he'll get the playing time. Looking yeah, I mean, he played 63% of the snaps last year, and I think that's even missing.
Let's say that's missing some games.
Right. So the usage in terms of on the field was there. You know, they don't really have a great receiving crew. I do think, maybe with May, maybe there's some like dead cat bounce in that pass game. Um, you know, I'm certainly not target him, and it's probably one when forced to make the decision, I go somewhere else. Like that might be one where it's like I take Tyler Conklin,
Mm-hmm.
and for the pure thing of like, they both catch the ball fine, but I'd much rather rely on bet on like Rodgers throwing the ball versus Drake May.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's. I mean, looking at his game log last year, it's pretty ugly. But I think everything with the Patriots last year was ugly.
Yeah. It
So if
was.
he's and so it could be one of those years where it's like he's perfectly salvageable. I mean, I haven't projected at 700 yards seems rich. That seems rich. With only 4 TDs though. I think that's just a matter of if he can play 17 games. So yeah, a little higher than I'd like. I might need to give him a do the Triple H, the Hunter Henry haircut, and get some of those snaps out of the way, just to sleep better at night.
Yeah, maybe just drop the games played to like, somewhere in the 10 to 14 range seems
That's
to
the
be where he
thing.
settles.
It's just like basically it doesn't, at least my system, I can't be as heavy handed as that.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, you're playing all 17. Yeah, you have all the games in the schedule. It's like, which ones do you pull out? Like baseball, I totally do that for baseball. Yeah. So on this, that I tend to be like, it'd be more on snaps. It's like, like, yeah, like even maybe he's, yeah, I mean, I have him playing like 80% of snaps. I got room.
Okay. So maybe an adjustment coming for Hunter Henry at some point.
Yes.
Maybe closer to 20. I like the upside.
Yeah.
I like, the possibility of change,
but
rookie quarterbacks and just the long history of maybe leaning on some dump offs and some tight end drops. Like I
right.
get the Hunter Henry appeal.
Yeah. I know. And I guess it's kind of, if you look at, that where the differences lie on my projected rankings versus like ADP is really like, it is just the sex appeal stuff that, you've got like, I got Bowers at like 18. I get it. Yeah. Maybe you're right. It doesn't look like a great passing offense. And, it doesn't look like a great quarterback situation. I don't know. I kind of think for the most part, they're all going to be kind of blah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a clear like top 10-ish among the tight ends. Like, the Ferguson, Kincaid, McBride at the back end. Obviously, Kelce, Kittle, LaPorta, Andrews, like Pitts, those guys at top. But like, I feel like Bowers goes right after them just because you're like, hey, I mean, I can take the Goddards, Fryermuths, Kmets,
right,
Schultz's, Conklins of the world, whenever. It doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
You might as well shoot for the fences, grab Bowers, circle back around later, and grab you.
I love Schultz. Him as a prospect. I mean, I mean, I don't think he'll really ever be a traditional tight end, but you could make an argument Kelce isn't.
No, he's not. Kelce doesn't block. I mean, he doesn't. He comes out of the game when they need somebody to block.
He's like, wait, that's my brother. I think you confuse him with my brother. My brother blocks. I catch touchdowns and starlets.
You sure you called the right play? Because I'm in here this time. Like,
yeah. I mean, like, almost all the time I'd be like, like, I missed on LaPorta. With that kind of thinking, no. So I'm interested in your thoughts on McBride. There's a lot of, I mean, he when Murray came back, he did really well, but then they add Marvin Harrison to the mix.
Yeah, I mean, I still like McBride. I feel like there was definitely, the switch whenever Murray came back. It looked really good. He really leaned on him, and that's a guy who had the yardage to kind of back up this, the boost that he's getting, in the back half of the season from week 8 on. He had a 95-yard game. He had 2 100-yard games. He was getting, 8, 9, 11 targets like consistently. Like Trey McBride definitely could be moving up. I feel like the limitation there is just, it's kind of built in with Kyler being an injury case. And then, as you mentioned, there's at least somebody more interesting there to receive some passes than what there was last year. So that's also part of the equation for sure. Which is why I have him down below, like, some of the other guys that we've talked about, like the Kyle Pitts hasn't shown it really other than his rookie year, but that offense seems like it's ready to move. And Ingram's another guy I have, but
no, it's a tough one. Like, I'm not buying McBride as like a top 3-4 tight end. I also just wonder if you try to extrapolate that thing. It's like, going into this year now, teams are going to scheme more for McBride. That
Yeah.
maybe he slid by a little bit and they weren't really planning on it. So it'll be interesting because it's not hard for most human tight ends. So let's just say like maybe you could separate Kelce out of it. You want to scheme him out, you can. You just
Yeah.
clutter up that middle. And I mean, I would think that's where you're, so it'll be interesting to see if they allow it. I just can't believe Kyler Murray was able to see him over the offensive lineman.
I don't believe that Kyler Murray can see anything. I mean, it's kind of crazy, being 7-8 inches shorter than your offensive lineman, and chucking the ball.
Right.
It's weird
But
with
Marvin
the rush.
Harrison, he'll see Marvin Harrison.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting with the rushing quarterbacks because they either really use the tight end position or they completely ignore it, and I feel like there's no in between. Like Lamar has always done it.
Well, I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's the running as much as the height.
But yeah, I guess because like Josh Allen was the one that I was going to go to. Like until last year, he really wasn't a tight end guy. But he's also a lot bigger than the guys we've talked about. And same with like Cam. Cam was never. I mean, Cam did some tight end. That's a lot. Cam was a big tight end guy.
No, he threw to Kelvin Benjamin all those years.
I mean, like I said, big tight end guy. He loved his tight end. He went to Kelvin Benjamin, and then he went to Greg Olsen for a couple of years.
Yeah, Greg Olsen. I mean, they're running two tight end. Everyone gives the Patriots the credit. They're running Benjamin and Olsen out there.
And actually, to the Patriots line, one of the stats I like to randomly throw out there is the top 5 rookie tight end finishers in PPR points all set their career high yardages their rookie year. Evan Engram would have fallen into that, but now he has been kicked out by Pitts and LaPorta in back-to-back seasons. Or in the last few seasons. So Engram was now been cleared from this stat.
Nice. Oh, man.
So my stat still holds.
I'm still bitter the Giants picked him. They could have taken Ramczyk, who's now that seems like it's a faded thing. It's not like it mattered or anything. But that there's no offensive, there's nothing more like tedious in offensive line except when your team stinks at offensive line. Then it's like you're like obsessed with it, which because the Bears, right? Yeah,
we haven't had an offensive line since the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the center. What happened?
Krutz?
Yeah, he had a great center.
Oh, he was great, and then once he left, which again was right after the Super Bowl, it's just been downhill from there. We've never put even when we spend money and draft and do everything, the offensive line still terrible. I mean, that's part of the Justin Fields thing. I don't completely blame him because he was running for his life.
The good thing is Caleb Williams just runs every down. He's just going to scramble every down anyway.
Yeah, he's just scramble anyway. So
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, behind the line of scrimmage, but he's not throwing in the pocket anyway. No. But at least maybe he's good at throwing outside the pocket.
Yeah, speaking of a guy who's not good at throwing and not good at throwing any kind of thing is Taysom Hill. But he comes in at 20 for you, 22 for me. And I just wanted to talk about him because there's a lot of talk about him. A lot of camp news about his usage and how much we're going to see him. He played, with the first team in preseason week 1 and all that. And he was actually randomly tight end 12 last year. Again, that has as much to do with him just being more healthy than a lot of tight ends as much as anything. But is this real, or is this we just get the same thing that we get from Taysom every year?
I mean, I think it's the same I'd expect. I mean, so I'm looking back last year. I mean, how many running touchdowns did he end up with?
He just has big touchdown weeks, and it just carries the overall numbers.
Well, I mean,
for the season,
right? I mean, he had 4 last year.
I mean, 4 passing, I think, and then he had another 2 receiving,
right?
And
yeah, I mean, I think he's real mediocre. He's just fine as a tight end. I know was it Juwan Johnson is a little dinged up. I mean, I will say, I mean, he did catch 30. He was targeted 40 times last year, which was, more than he had the last 3 years combined. So, there's potential there. I mean, he hasn't really shown to be like a red zone threat for the most part. He's a fun one for best ball if he's tight end eligible. I
Yeah,
mean,
those random weeks where they give him 2 touchdowns on 3 plays is
right.
still works out for best ball purposes.
Yeah.
Um,
But his floor, I mean, his floor seems to be real real low. I'm looking at the game log just to get a sense for.
yeah, I mean, it is.
I mean,
It's really
there's
bad
some
when.
right. I mean, I think more. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some. I'm seeing several weeks in the 30 to 50 plus range of tight ends. um, but he also had, let's see, 6 top 10 weeks. I don't know. It's there appears to be a lot more variance. And I don't. I mean, like I said, so that screams best ball. I don't think. Um, let's say any sane, or let's just say any person with standard emotions will have to cut him, right? Like, because it's just going to drive you nuts. You're going to lose a week because he has like 2 carries for 4 yards and then like 1 target. And
Yeah.
you're like, I could have played 25 other tight ends and won this week. Like, just don't do it to yourself.
Yeah.
And just play. If you need Taysom, if let's just say you're an LDS member, or I don't know, just play best ball and take Taysom in all your leagues. And then,
Yeah, if that's the need, if you have to have him.
yeah, that'd be my take.
All right, I like that one. I think best ball is the ideal place for him because I mean, what ends up happening is you sit him, he has that huge week, you start him for like the next 3 weeks, he does nothing, you cut
Just
him, then he
just
has a
don't
great week
do
on
it.
somebody else's team. So
Just
yeah,
don't do it to
just don't
yourself.
put yourself in that. Go grab somebody else. The upside may not be there, but at least you can get like 5 points and not feel like you lost because you got a 0 from Taysom Hill. Let's talk about the late guys. Who's your favorite late round tight end? Let's talk about like if you expect to, maybe a guy that's a little safer and maybe a guy that you might take for the upside play.
Okay. Well, the safer one would probably be Tyler Conklin. I mean, he's always been a good receiver. He came out of Minnesota, I think, when they had kind of had a couple tight ends. 3 straight years of 87 targets. That's kind of Chris Davis-esque.
I was gonna say Chris Davis style.
I mean, his yards per target I mean, there's nothing sexy in it. I will say the one thing about him is he hasn't had touchdown luck. I mean, he had no touchdowns last year. 61 catches, 0 TDs for a tight end is pretty hard to do. So yeah, you've got some massive, with going from Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers could be a huge swing. So I like him at, I think there's upside there. If I had to go like more off the reservation, but still a guy that you'd be able to start week 1, right? So like a Tucker Kraft, I wouldn't put in that list because you're not gonna be able to play him. I kind of like Okonkwo on Tennessee.
Okay.
I mean, it's they've got a lot of mouths to feed, and I don't know if Will Levis would be the chef I would choose typically to feed those type of mouths. So but I feel like if they he's been good when he's had to play. Seems like a solid athlete. mildly intriguing, a guy I like to get real late in some drafts. And then if I'm going even further, I'll be a homer and pick Jatavian Sanders. I don't know how anyone could be relevant in that Carolina offense. I will say he, he's good. Not Bowers, but I look at Carolina offense. I could see Sanders having a pretty solid year, and us now talking about him next year as is this a guy you draft in a standard 1 TD? Is he like TE12?
Yeah.
I was hoping my Giants would take him. So we'll see, because he would have been, he was a 5-star out of high school as a defensive lineman. And so he's that type of athlete playing tight end, but not the picture like as one of those like kind of like Von Miller-esque kind of types where like you got that speed,
super athletic. Yeah,
you're not necessarily going to bowl people over, but you're pretty strong. So I like that was one where in a deep league, in a keeper league, or dynasty league, I'm sorry, he's got a shot.
Yeah. All right, some names from me that I like. I'm not going to get too far into them. Take either Green Bay tight end, Luke Musgrave, or Tucker Kraft. We already talked about that. We already talked about Hunter Henry. Mike Gesicki is a guy who I'm always okay taking just a late flyer on. He's in Cincinnati now.
That is weird. That's interesting.
That could be interesting if they just let him finally do what he's supposed to do, which is just run routes. Stop putting him in line and blocking. Stick him in a slot. Let him run.
So they just got a bigger Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they lost him. They replaced him with Mike Gesicki. I mean, Drew Sample's not any good. We've already seen that.
We got Tanner
Eric All is there. If you kind of want to look at somebody new in Cincinnati, it would be Eric All. That could be another guy.
What about Tanner Hudson?
Yeah. He could definitely be one. I also like Colby Parkinson for the Rams because we know Higbee's starting on the pup. So you have a little bit of time there.
I think I took him in. I think he was my last tight end pick in Fishbowl, because for that same thing.
I don't mind that at all. I mean, you just get a few games.
Yeah, Higbee's, and I don't know. I mean, we don't know when Higbee comes back, and if he, I don't mind that one.
Juwan Johnson is basically being ignored because he's injured right now. If you can wait, if you want to pair him with Colby Parkinson for a late little thing, but that's so late. It's not really even an option. Ben Sinnott in Washington, although Zach Ertz is getting some praise as well, but Zach Ertz is going to be on the pup by like Tuesday, so I don't really expect that to last long term. But that's some of the names I think later that I would look at.
Don't sleep on Daniel Bellinger.
Some people still like him. I don't know why, but
the Daniel and Daniel connection. I mean,
I really don't know why anybody still drafts him, but I still go see him go on occasion in best balls. That's not going to happen. I mean, do you want a little bit of time here to complain about Daniel Jones, or you ready to get out of here, Rudy?
No, hey man. I mean, he seems like a really good guy. I mean, it's like, so he's only maybe a top 50 at his job in the US. Like, that's still I mean, being top 50 at anything. I mean, if I wish I could be top 50 in a job that pays like 40 million to the top 30, right?
Just get that 5th-year tag, and that's all that matters.
I do like he's grown the beard though. I mean that I'm seeing progress. He doesn't have that.
Just banding up a little bit.
He had kind of a Colin Jost. He had that Colin Jost punch me face, and now I think now the beard, it changes up things. I mean, it wasn't enough to stop me from wanting to punch Ted Cruz, but Daniel Jones, I'm like, okay, Let me see how you do with this Beard and Malik Neighbors.
Yeah,
Like,
hopefully Major League Neighbors. I mean,
please just give us something.
he says no doubt he's playing week 1 Neighbors, so that's
yeah,
good.
yeah. So we'll talk about him on wide receiver, but yeah,
We'll get to him.
I like him.
All right, let's wrap it up here. We're done for the show. If you have any other questions, as of course I already mentioned, at Rudy Gamble on Twitter, at RazBeatOn. Like, subscribe, rate, review, whether you're watching us on youtube.com/Razzball Fantasy or listening to us through whatever podcast service you're using. Thanks for coming on, Rudy. I'll talk to you next week when we cover running backs.
Sounds
See you,
good.
bud.